Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We're going to give it a couple more moments as more people dial in today. All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We're so thrilled to have you all joining us today. My name is Mark Linehan. I'm dialing in from Malden, Massachusetts, 5.5 miles directly north of the MIT campus. And before we get started, the first thing we want to do is we want to direct you to the bottom right of your Zoom screen. You should see a chat box. And the first thing that we want to do is if you open up a chat window, you should see a message from me popping up right now. We'd like you all to tell us where you're logging in from today. Before you do that, if you could please set it to all panelists and attendees. So at the bottom of the chat, it will say who it's sent to. Just say set it from all panelists and attendees. And let us know where you're dialing in from today. Cancun, Madrid, Turkey, Los Angeles, Chicago, South Africa, Switzerland, Singapore, London, South Carolina, Dubai, Nuremberg, Quebec, Germany, Orlando, Mumbai, Dallas, Nigeria, Pennsylvania, Greece, Mexico City, India, Peru, Texas, Bangalore, Chile, Sweden, Frankfurt, Spain, Pakistan, India, Kuala Lumpur, Saudi Arabia. We're coming from all over today.
Yeah, there's Turkey in there as well.
Brazil.
Bolivia, Kentucky, Paraguay, Florida, Dubai, West Virginia, Brazil, New York, Singapore, Maine. So as you can see, we have a truly global audience and a truly global group of students that join us on these courses. So let's see, we have almost 100 participants joining us today, so let us begin. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. Good morning from the Northeastern United States. My name is Mark Linehan, and I'm logging in today from Malden, Massachusetts, just north of the MIT campus. And thank you for joining us for this webinar today on MIT Professional Education's course, Digital Transformation from AI and Internet of Things to Cloud, Blockchain, and Cyber Security. We are particularly thrilled today to have both faculty members here with us today. We are thrilled to be joined by Dr. Abel Sanchez, research scientist and executive director of MIT's Geospatial Data Center. Good morning, Dr. Sanchez.
Good morning, Mark.
And we're also thrilled to have with us today Professor John Williams, professor of information engineering and director of MIT's Geospatial Data Center. Good morning, Professor Williams.
Hello, world.
Truly.
And with that, I would love to hand it over to them so they can talk to us about this amazing course. So Dr. Sanchez, if you'd like to take it away.
Good morning. My name's Abel Sanchez. As mentioned, hello to everyone around the world. It's always exciting to see the participation and the coverage. We're going to be talking about a truly fascinating subject, and I'll start off just by saying a few things about myself. As usual, if you really want to read about me, there's a lot more online. But this is a topic that we're deeply passionate about, and we have been working on it at the applied level with a number of Fortune 500 companies throughout the last 10 years and a number of industries, and it's something that we're truly passionate about. So we're applied. We also get the advantage of reading about all of the interesting studies since we're academics as well, and we're just fascinated by the potential and the transformative possibilities that exist. It's not to say that it's easy, as we will remark, no doubt, but there's a tremendous opportunity here and a threat to the world. And so with that, I'll pass it over to John so he can introduce himself next.
Hi, good morning. As Abel said, both of us are fairly applied, and we always like these hello world applications, you know, where you program something simple, but you get some insight from that. My background is that I started numerical methods, realized that writing software was actually something that ought to be studied, and basically from making lots of mistakes myself in some of the architectures we did in the early days. but we're really excited at the moment about what's happening in the world. Certainly, the software revolution is not just confined to software; it's driving, industry. And the 5 topics that we're going to go through, we think, are the fundamental technologies that are affecting industry today, that you need to have some background in them. I was lucky enough to get involved with the Internet of Things in the beginning of 2000s, and we thought the problem was technology and in having devices and things talk to each other, but it turned out that that actually wasn't the problem, that it was much more nuanced than that, and that the revolution of the web has changed everything. That today we talk about developing minimal viable products because we actually need to learn about our audience, about our customers, and some people call it that we're hyper connected. And certainly, I'm sure you all are using the web in every day, and we too in education are going through this digital transformation that most of us now are doing things online. The chalk and talk, we still do it, but education is changing, and we'll talk about that because we're going through the same transformation that a lot of industries are going through, and it's stressful. Okay, Mark, let's go to the next one. Yep. Abel, why don't you kick off this?
Sure. So, Mark, why don't you go to the next slide so we can have a background, or actually we have some questions here before we get going that we'd like to ask you more than anything else, just to get a sense of who the audience is. So if you could fill out that survey. And the question here is, have you written code in the last 2 years? And I'm sure some of you will already start to think, I have not, and that's okay. We just want to understand you do not need to have written code before, but we simply want to know the background of the audience. So if you could answer that, that would be great. And I think there's one more question, and they might as well answer both at the same time, Mark, if that's possible. So if you go forward to the next slide.
Well, we have results for each poll answer. There we go.
Okay.
So here's our results for this question.
Okay, so it looks like
Great.
about a quarter. This is probably typical.
Yes.
Most of the courses that we've taught.
And the other thing that I'll mention as well is that the participants tend to be very experienced with a wide representation of industries, government, even education. So it's a pretty rich mix, and I think the important part there is that you can benefit also from your classmates quite a bit.
Yeah, networking is good.
Yeah. And this is a follow-up on the first. Have you deployed a server to the cloud? Yourself, not someone in your team. And I guess those results will come up momentarily. Oh, about the same. Interesting. Okay, great.
It's probably the same people.
Yeah, it's the same people.
It's unlikely that you've deployed something in the cloud without writing some code, but
right.
it is possible.
Although visual
possible,
languages
right.
are moving pretty fast. So if you go to the first slide, we'll start off by just talking about the possibilities of data. And John and I often talk about IoT and what it is, and what are the parts that we can call out. And I think one of the ones that we often remark on is a transformation that's taking place around the concept of creating new products. And when it comes to how you think about them, how you design them, and what goes into them. And I think IoT here is very relevant. And John, I wonder if you want to say some words before I react to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of this came from the web, and suddenly that machines could talk to machines. You know, our hero is Tim Berners-Lee that hangs out in MIT now. You know,
Sir
he
Tim.
invented, yes, Sir Tim, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I should. He hasn't decided to step down yet from
Right.
royal family.
Right.
Uh,
Tim's
um, he really solved a tough problem of having machines talk to machines, and solved it in a very elegant way with HTTP and you know, HTML for laying out web pages. But really, the web changed everything in that we could suddenly access data. And then in the early 2000s, the idea of the Internet of Things was born in actually the auto ID labs in MIT and 6 other labs around the world. And we thought the challenge was how to get devices to talk to devices. But it turned out it was, as I say, a lot more nuanced than that. That once you've got machines talking, you have other things that happen, like cybersecurity becomes an issue. But today, the ability to put, say, a web server on a device allows you to talk to, for example, a camera. I always use the example of a camera in either Hong Kong or, say, Beijing, that you can issue an HTTP command, you know, to a URL, and that camera will respond. And so you can talk to devices, you can talk to actual data, you can get data from around the world. And this has really changed everything. And you have a great couple of pictures, I know, Abel, of Rome, which you may want to talk about.
Actually, I don't have them on this deck, so we can leave them
talk through them,
for the course. But I just wanted to remark, and by the way, we'll do a lot of this in the course, and where John will speak and then I will speak. It's great because it gives you, it sort of sparks ideas as the other person talks. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that the tremendous pace of change that we're all experiencing and the decisions that we need to make on technology are pretty daunting. At times, I like to say that being a modern human, the tax on being a modern human is our ability to be able to absorb new information. And if you think about the number of technologies that we need to master, even simply to operate our home, and that's increasing, right? I mean, just having cameras and televisions and devices, and if you think about all of the different things that you could have connected to your router, they're quite a bit. At my home, I have well over 20 because I have some smart lights, and I think I'm not heavily automated, right? But these are things that are starting to challenge not just our environment, not just things we see in the press, but also the way we make decisions within our work environment. And when it comes to leaders being able to ground themselves and make decisions, this was some of our thinking as we went into this course. We wanted to give you some fundamentals as well as some applied examples of technology for you to ground that thinking, because it is pretty daunting when Accenture, and we work with Accenture, so we're not talking bad about them, but Accenture, IBM, Microsoft, and you have this parade of consultants coming through your offices pitching you the latest gadget or pitching you the solution to all your problems. And so we think that it is important to have some fundamentals to ground some of that or some of that thinking to be able to make better decisions when it comes to technology. So certainly IoT in my mind emphasizes a new way of creating products, and that we can get feedback earlier. And if we can get feedback earlier from that device in the field, we have an opportunity to make better decisions. And I certainly make great examples during the course when it comes to sports, because it's great. You are in a battle, you are in the field. And how do you make better decisions? And you're starting to see it already. The NFL football, professional American football, is going on right now in the United States. And you can see the players on the sidelines with tablets, and they're huddling around and studying what's taking place while they wait to go back out into the field. And so this cycle of feedback that John, you often talked about, maybe you want to say a little bit about agriculture, is one that we see as very, very new, and what's the innovation eventually becomes the need to have, otherwise you can't compete anymore.
Yeah, I mean, just enhancing or maybe adding to what Abel's saying, having a device today that you can talk to, almost any product can be monitored. So you could imagine if you wanted to, you could monitor a book. I mean, the whole thing about audiobooks now is they can tell what you've paid attention to. If you've skipped through things, they know. Netflix the same. You know, you can skip on through a scene 10 seconds. They can deduce from that whether you like a scene or not, or whether you like an actor. And so what it means is that you can learn about your customers, that you can get live information actually about how they're using your products. And that information reduces the risk. So for example, when Netflix makes a movie, they don't have the same risk that Hollywood has. And we're seeing that now. They're predicting that this next year is going to be a disaster for Hollywood. It was in the papers this morning, saying that, you know, they've got no blockbuster movies lined up. The Star Wars movie was made last year, the same from Lion King, etc. Whereas Netflix and Amazon Prime have the ability to make movies with very little risk because they know what their customers like. And so, as Abel is saying, almost any product today, you have to think about the telemetry. You have to think how you're going to monitor it. You can monitor its health. Ideally, you'd like to know how it's being used, how your customer is actually using that device. You all seen how apps have taken over your cell phone. You know, we talk about it as a cell phone. I mean, that's the last thing we probably do is talk to people on it. We're monitoring it all the time. We're looking for emails. We're looking for WhatsApp, you know, Facebook, etc., Instagram. And it's a very different world out there today because we have these devices. And so IoT is one of these foundational things that's producing data. And maybe we'll go to the next slide, because this data has allowed AI and machine learning to flourish. That without that volume of data, this field really wouldn't have taken off. And machine learning, basically neural nets came into being. Well, neural nets had been around since the 80s, 1980s, yeah. But really they were being given up on. They weren't successful until 2012, when a guy called Jeffrey Hinton in Toronto, in Canada, showed that they could actually identify photographs and the objects within photographs with high accuracy. And this has changed everything. So today, you need data. Without data, you can't do machine learning. You can't actually make that data talk to you. You don't understand its meaning. Abel, maybe you want to talk a little bit about machine learning and some of the areas you've
Sure. So I think one of the interesting things to note about this revolution, just as John was saying, was that we now have data and we have a platform, and this will lead into some of the later slides. But you know, oftentimes people talk about the fuel and the engine, and we have an ability now to store information, and we have an ability to process it. We have cloud, which we'll talk more about, but that has given us different capabilities. And so if you think about being able to capture, say, the traffic of a city, if you think about being able to route the traffic of a city, and traffic applications obviously do that, these are capabilities we didn't have before, and they are predicated upon having that tremendous, vast, elastic, efficient type of storage, and where we can use those resources based on demand. And you also have the ability to be able to process in parallel, if needed, at high quantities. And so that has given us very different capabilities. And throughout industry, throughout academia, you're seeing these ripples. If you want to look at a market signal, take a look at MIT that is investing $1 billion. The overall budget of MIT is not that different from that. And they're investing $1 billion to be able to create a new college of computing with a core component, or a core component of which is artificial intelligence. And there's artificial intelligence conferences in every single domain that you can imagine. And again, I guess it's worth asking here, are we overhyping it? And we've done that before, meaning academia has done that before in AI. There was the lost, you know, decades of AI because it was overpromised, and there is some of that certainly, but there is a lot of business grounded applications. And to give you a simple example, if you wanted to gauge sentiment analysis, say in a restaurant today, you could take an algorithm off the shelf of any of the cloud vendors you'd want to consider, be able to pass that text in, and be able to be notified of a bad review, which for a lot of businesses that are in the say hospitality industry, is make or break, the power of the influencers today, right? And so it does provide business value. It can do a lot of things. There's a lot of things it cannot do. We've seen some of the limitations of autonomous vehicles, but they're making a great deal of progress. And so this is an area that has tremendous potential, a great deal of investment. Academia is flagging it in a big way. Industry is going in heavy. And so certainly there's a great deal that is good here. So I don't know if you have any reactions there, additional reactions, John, to AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you say, that what we see is that understanding a computing language, if you like, just one, it doesn't really matter which, opens doors for you, because today a lot of the tooling has changed. So if we think, historically that we had, the steam engine that gave us the Industrial Revolution. Now we have tools that allow very small teams actually to take on the largest companies. And this is one of the themes that we want to show you some of those tools. So for example, if you want to teach yourself machine learning, you can spin up a machine that will show you, say, 100 different examples of machine learning. If you have a robot like this, you'd probably use reinforcement learning, that you could teach this machine to walk without having to have a detailed algorithm yourself. All you'd need is a reinforcement learning algorithm, and that machine could teach itself how to walk. So part of this is about the technologies. Part of it is about, or I'd say the major part is about, how do you learn quickly? Because all of us have to relearn what it means to be, part of this world today. The tooling is very different to 10 years ago. We'll see that as we move to the cloud. I think actually the next slide is the cloud. And we can talk a little bit about that, because the cloud suddenly provides a whole set of tooling that gives us visibility into supply chains, visibility into pipelines for producing software, but visibility as well into all aspects of a business. So today we're organizing the software very differently, that we talk about loosely coupled architectures, that to some extent the old monolithic architectures are beginning to hold us up. So if we look at things like the ERP system, the enterprise resource planning system that almost every company uses, that it's the backbone of most industries, that they need to have an ERP system that shows what they're spending, takes care of their personnel, etc. We're seeing that the modern companies are ripping those apart because it's very difficult to change them. And the cloud is, as this picture shows, it's machines, but I'd say it's also more software, that we have software products that today you're not going to really maintain your own database. You'll probably use one in the cloud. And they're largely, they'll scale well, that somebody else is looking after them, that they'll scale for you. We talk about serverless. And these are basically either functions, they could be small, or they could be large, like databases that will automatically scale for you. Abel, I know that you're excited by the cloud. Maybe you want to say a few words about...
yeah, I'm very excited by the cloud.
Catching the cloud.
But right before I jump in, I just wanted to react to some of the comments that I'm seeing in the chat window. And there's a question as to how heavy in technology or business it is. And I just wanted to comment that we'd like to see ourselves as in between computer scientists, which can be, is not necessarily more theoretical, more focused on the technology, and then the Sloan School, where it's more focused on the business problem. So we touch the technology, but we recognize the business problem as well. And so a lot of our conversations, if you've seen so far, we're talking about tech, but we're also talking about the practical applications. When it comes to cloud, this is a good example of that, in that you certainly could go out and build this technology yourself. You could put up some servers, you could download some of the programs that you need to run, and you could start to do this. But you pretty soon start to run into some of the problems that technology companies ran into 15 years ago as they started to do this. Google started to run into these problems in 2001. In 2002, they were solving some of the problems of inter-rack communication and a lot of the challenges that if you were to set out to do this today, you'd run into. And so the big question to ask yourself is, where is your value? Is it in building clouds, or is it on creating a product or a service that you have an advantage of, or that you have a responsibility to deliver in the case of governments? So certainly most anyone, there's a t-shirt that we like to show, right, that says friends don't let friends, right, build data centers. And this goes further than that. It goes further than that as the abstractions continue to rise. And so the possibilities of creating great new technology today are very different, because oftentimes it is bringing together a number of services to be able to deliver a new product. If you look at the example of Uber, a classic one, they did not write the mapping layer, they got Google's. If you look at their messaging service, they did not write the messaging layer either, they used Twilio's. And it goes on and on. And so as you see a lot of these new companies that are very flat, have very small numbers of employees. Another one is Airbnb, they have about 5,000 employees versus 150,000 from Hilton, and they have more rooms that they list than Hilton and Marriott combined. You have tremendous efficiencies. And so we're both talking here about the business models at times that are enabled by this great technology, but also about the new abstractions that you need to master, you need to understand. And when it comes to cloud, I get overly excited about it at times, but it is this new platform. You can think of it as the desktop in the 1990s, if you're old enough to remember that. You had to know what software you could use to be able to create or be able to carry out your work. This is the same thing when it comes to cloud. And if you think you understand cloud, it's a bit like quantum mechanics. You don't understand cloud, right? Because there is so much in it that it is overwhelming, but it's also a tremendous amount of research. So let me throw it back to John to get him to react to some of that.
No, I mean, I think you brought up an important point there, Abel, about abstractions, that the words that we use, everyone understands probably cloud, but we'll all understand it in very different ways. And if you've actually touched the cloud and spun up machines in the cloud, you'll know that it's, okay, some things are easy, some things are different. We talk about the pain points are changing. It's not like that they've gone away. It's just that now they're at a different level, that maintaining a database is not a problem. Basically backing up a database, having 2 or 3 versions of your data around the cloud, it's not a problem, that you can do that quite easily. However, there are still problems left that you'll need to think about. It's very different to deploy an application in containers in the cloud, where Kubernetes is taking care of, if one of the machines goes down, it'll automatically spin up another machine. I think Abel and I both have spun up Kubernetes, and it's very difficult to kill it off. We found that.
Yeah, that's right.
I was killing off machines and they were popping back up again. And I was thinking, what the heck is going on? And it was because I was running Kubernetes in the background and it was taking care of it. So your problems move to different places. In the cloud, you have to have lots of keys that you're maintaining for encrypting your data, that you may be handling not just 1 or 2 keys that typically, or passwords that we normally think about. You may be handling thousands of them or tens of thousands. So the things that you need to think about are quite different. Security in the cloud is very different. We think that it's actually better than security that you can roll yourself. It's very sophisticated, but you need to understand what have they done? What are these new tools that they're providing for you to deploy security in the cloud? So the cloud is a huge enabler that today we've got most of the big companies are running all their operations in the cloud. The US government is moving all its military operations to the cloud. And that's a good sign that security is probably pretty good there. If the military are doing it, that's a sign that you can't ignore. The government is moving there. And so how do you move to the cloud? A lot of companies are trying to do that. Most companies actually fail. Only about 25% succeed. So you have to ask yourself, how do you go about it? How are you going to take advantage of these technologies? And that's something that your CEO needs to answer. And you have to ask yourself then, how does your CEO make these decisions? Do they actually understand these technologies? Are they going to employ, for example, cybersecurity? How much should they spend on that? So our sense today is that people have expertise, but it may be expertise in the wrong thing. That we've had to relearn programming, that the way we program now is not the way we programmed 10 years ago. The architectures have changed totally. The threats have changed. Cybersecurity 10 years ago, it was maybe on the horizon, but nobody was really worried about it. Maybe it was a little bit more, like 15 years ago. But today, it's an existential threat. It's one of the biggest threats probably to your company, that if somebody has access to your email server, that's one of the things that they'll attack. You have to ask yourself, if they have all our emails, what does that mean for our business? So I think that's probably the next slide, if I'm correct. Yes, cybersecurity. This is the depressing one. I'll hand over to you, Abel, because I always get very depressed about this.
Well, certainly when it comes to security, I think this is something all we're very conscious of. It's in the press. We worry about our machines, we worry about our financial data, and it's something that we have sort of a depressing graph that we often discuss. That as time goes on, the cost to attack continues to drop, and the cost to defend continues to increase. And this is something that is happening across all industries, and that is certainly a challenge. To bring in some very practical reality, the United States this summer was attacked surgically, if you want to use that word, to medium and small cities. So they didn't target Boston, New York, LA, because they have much better security teams. And they targeted the small to medium-sized city across the country. And so there were hundreds of cases that were reported. They were using ransomware, a fairly known attack, and still it was very successful. And so we see that this threat has become an industry. There are the state actors out there, but we won't get into that too much because that's even more well, let's leave that out for now. But certainly there is a cyber crime industry that is developing products much like anyone else, and they are creating business cases. And you can see on the type of attacks that were launched against the United States this summer. And they're pretty successful. The city of Baltimore decided not to pay the ransomware. And the last report was way over $5 million in paying out to consultants to try to clean up after the breach that they had had. And so this attack is something that is constant. Here at MIT, we have some understanding of what the threat is, and historically we used to be completely open on the campus. And if you were to visualize what was taking place, and some of that we will share during the course, you'll be quite surprised at what you see. And so this is something that has become now part of the reality. And not only that, we need to be faster at it. So if you think about the acceleration that's taking place when it comes to our need and responding to the challenges of the market or responding to the needs of constituencies, we need to be even faster when it comes to security. So the question is, if we couldn't do it fast enough before, how are we going to do it fast enough now that we're being asked to go 10 times faster? And so that's certainly a challenge, but a lot of the tooling, a lot of the organizational models, all of those are responding to these new needs. And I see that you want to say something, John.
Well, no, I was going back, actually, again, somebody's asking about, is this a techie program? What I'd say is that to make business decisions these days, I'd say you need to understand these technologies. And as I was saying, what's happening in business is that the organizational structure is being changed by the tooling and the way now that we're developing products. That if you think, why are we organized in this hierarchical way? That companies 100 years ago were organized the same way as most companies today. I say most companies because I'd say the tech companies and the Netflix and the Flickrs and the Instagrams are beginning to be organized quite differently. The teams are much lighter weight. If you look at Amazon, highly successful, $1 trillion company, their teams are 2 pizza teams that, okay, I don't know how much each person eats, but we think that a 2-person team is probably 10 people, something like that. So these are not huge teams anymore, and these teams are being given high responsibility. They can deploy live code. This was never the case before. You used to have levels of sign-off, but what they found, and we'll talk a little bit about DevOps, which is hidden inside some of these technologies, if you like, about the cloud. Most companies are employing DevOps, which gives this ability for people to deploy themselves to the cloud. And so these technologies are changing business. And so I'd say ultimately our goal is obviously to understand how we can do business better. So as Abel says, we're not just talking about these technologies in an ungrounded way. We want to ground you so that you understand what these words mean. If I say serverless, what does it mean? And I'd say most people today, these words are just floating. They may have heard the word serverless, or they may have heard the word, PKI or whatever. But what do these actually mean? And you need to understand them to make business decisions. So cybersecurity is one of those that there are certain words like hashing that you need to understand, what does it mean? And so what we want to give you is some grounding in these abstractions, some grounding in what these words mean. We want you to touch the cloud. We want you to maybe see how passwords are cracked, because something like a dictionary attack, you need to have some concept about what does it mean. So that's part of our goal, is to ground you so that you can then look up on the web yourself and get the information that you need to make a business decision. Abel, let's move on to cybersecurity. It's too depressing.
I just wanted to expand a little bit on what John mentioned, in that we're seeing a change of organizations. There are the Pathfinder, sort of leading the way type of organizations, but we're also seeing a great push in the traditional enterprise. And if you think about what they need to overcome, it's a big challenge, and not everybody will survive, but certainly there's a huge opportunity here. And I want to talk briefly just about the role of the CEO and the traditional CIO. Historically, the CIO has been the person who keeps the lights on, make sure the mail server runs, make sure the databases continue to be on, and so on. But it has not been considered part of the strategy of the company. However, that has changed, and we're now seeing CIOs that have, chief information officer and chief of strategy. And the reason for that is that the way you implement, or this is the argument I'm making, the way you implement strategy today is using technology. And the closer you are to that, and the closer you are to thinking this way, the more of an opportunity that you have to be able to be nimble and fast on your feet. And so we're seeing two patterns, right? One is where technologists are gaining the trust of the executives in moving into strategic, traditionally business positions over time. And we're also seeing the opposite. Business traditional CEOs, C-suite executives that are moving into technology and that are requesting the 1-week boot camps, that are immersing themselves in technology because they understand that this is essential to be able to move forward. And so it is an exciting time, I think, for both, for the traditional business executives to move into a new space, and for the technologists to get a seat at the table. In fact, there is a book that's called Getting a Seat at the Table, and that we can talk more about that in the course, but I just wanted to emphasize that. And I know John and I do blockchain, but
well, I see we're running out of time. How do you want to handle this, Mark?
So we can go to the end.
Yeah, we can jump to the end. Blockchain, Abel and I love and hate it at the same time.
Yeah.
I've certainly lost money on it, but it's a great technology. And blockchain, it's going to have some impact for sure on the financial sector and also other sectors like agriculture. That's one. Anyway, Mark, hello world.
Sure.
Actually, we kind of covered that.
Right.
We really believe you need to touch these technologies. We call them the hello world problems. We're not going to dive deeply into these things, but you need to be able to run things on, say, the cloud, or to go to GitHub and download somebody else's code and run it on your local machine. One of the things that's changed is open source now has given rise to millions of libraries out there that you can take advantage of. So as Abel was saying, if you want to do sentiment analysis, or if you want to do facial recognition, basically you can just go to the cloud, download or understand what their API is and push images there, and they will be recognized. And so you can do this in half a day. You could have something up and running. Actually, this is an interesting one, Abel, blockchain. Maybe you want to just say, what the hello worlds of blockchain are.
Sure. Just expanding on what John mentioned, a lot of times our goal is to give you the 5-minute hello world that illustrates a larger pattern. And the reason we emphasize them so much is because we use them heavily ourselves. These great examples, when we find them, can change our way of thinking. And so we're hoping for you to do the same. And so we will certainly be touching blockchain. You will be doing a blockchain transaction. You will experience the same as if you were, say, an MIT hacker in the early days and you were trying to participate in this ecosystem. And it's a great opportunity. If you're not familiar with blockchain, it is the potential to disintermediate the trusted third parties that have existed in the past, be it financial institutions or governments. And there are some very practical applications being used in the line of business. There are new consortiums that are emerging in a number of industries, and that potential to be able to carry out transactions in a much more efficient manner. Just like the web democratized the sharing of information across the world, this has the potential to democratize financial transactions. And so if it can carry out some of that, and I'd like to point out identity, the ability to have a cryptocurrency and the ability to have smart contracts as the killer properties of blockchain. If you can have some of that, there's a great potential, or any one of those, I should say, we would have taken a big step forward. And
just talking to this diagram, you're exactly right. Today moving money by wire takes maybe 4 business days, whereas if you go to some of the cryptocurrencies, you can move it across the world in minutes. So it's going to have an impact. Basically, banks have got to catch up. So let's. This is MetaMask for moving money or for making transactions on Ethereum. So I think we've kind of covered that, right? Yeah. We've talked about hands-on. This is one of the image recognition tools that Amazon has. So you can just send images up there and it'll tell you what's in the images.
I'll make a quick comment here on the potential of these platforms and sort of the risks as well. There's a new startup that has the ability of being able to pick up your image and then match it to all of those that exist in social media. So you can imagine that as you meet a person in the street that you've never seen before, if you were somehow, looking at your phone, or if you were you had some sort of device over your eyes that could show you the context of that data, you'd be able to find out for most people their name, their profession, etc. Right? And now the concern is that this might be the end of privacy, right? That police forces and border agents and everywhere else, the moment they see you, they'd be able to get your entire context, right? And so there's a tremendous amount of power. There are some risks that we will speak about as well as we go through this. Certainly, Facebook and other platforms are being questioned for this. But there's a tremendous engine here that allows you to do things easily. And just as John said, it doesn't mean that your problems are solved. They just move to a different place, and you can focus. You can have a closer focus on what it is that you're delivering that has value.
Yep.
So I think this is you, Mark.
Then I will take it back over. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for that. I am feeling almost overwhelmed by the amount of information that I just received, and I know this webinar well. So thank you, gentlemen, both so much. Dr. Sanchez and Professor Williams, thank you so much. So before we get started with our Q&A section, which we're going to be starting in just a couple moments, some of you have already put in your questions into the Q&A box. Those of you who have not, if you look to the bottom left of your Zoom screen right now, you will see a box that says Q&A, and that is where we want you to be putting our questions for our distinguished faculty, which we'll get to in just a moment. But we wanted to talk a little bit about, on the other end, we wanted to talk about how these kind of webinars and video lectures and back and forth, this is not just what's going to be happening with this class. With this course, you're going to be having video lectures. You'll also be having weekly assessments, real-world application scenarios, using all the companies that Dr. Sanchez and Professor Williams mentioned. You'll have discussion boards. You will also have, one of the additional resources we have is the global community of our students. As you could see in the chat box when we first opened the webinar, we have people joining us from all over the world, and we are going to be pulling from the experiences and expertise from our students all over the world, and you're going to be learning from each other as well as from our amazing MIT faculty. Again, this course is offered through MIT Professional Education, which is a gateway to MIT knowledge and expertise, connecting industry with MIT research knowledge and expertise. We're going through this as quickly as possible because I know you want to be asking questions of our faculty. So I'm just going to be going through this as quickly as possible. MIT Professional Education has been around for over 70 years. It's positioned under the MIT School of Engineering. And it is faculty taught and faculty led. Now, when you complete this course, so what do you get in the end? You get all this knowledge and expertise, but you also want to be able to show it off. So when you finish this course, if you complete 80% of all required activities, you will be receiving a certificate of completion, which is awarded in the form of a blockchain certificate, and that can be displayed on social media. It can be such as LinkedIn and other digital platforms. You will also be awarded 3.6 CEUs. Those are continuing education units, and those can be applied towards professional development. They can be applied toward professional certificates and licensing requirements. Your program advisor can give you more specific information as to how those can be used, but so you will be having a greater connection to MIT through this. And also we want to talk briefly about the Fire Hydrant Award. So they have a saying that life at MIT is like drinking from a fire hose. You get all this information, you get all this knowledge thrown at you, which, to be perfectly honest, is how I feel right now after this webinar. I feel like I've absorbed so much information that I need to process. But for those of our students who demonstrate MIT values and excellence and really embrace passionately receiving all that information and really just dive in to this course, you will be receiving an MIT Professional Education Fire Hydrant Award, which is also in the form of a blockchain certificate that can be displayed on social media, such as LinkedIn. Now, as you can see, the participants that we have on this webinar, there's a lot of geographic diversity among our participants, but in this course itself, we have a lot of other kinds of diversity as well. As you can see by the chart on the left, people of all different levels of work experience have benefited from this course. It's almost split into thirds. About a third of our participants have between 16 and 20 years of experience. Almost a third have over 20 years of experience, and a little more than a third have less than 15 years of experience. So no matter where you are in your career, you will benefit from this course. Even if you are, you know, very long in your career and you've been there for 20, 25 years, what could I have to learn from this? People in your position have benefited a lot from this. And also people who are brand new and say, isn't this for a more senior person? People with only 1 to 10 years of experience have also benefited from this course as well. And as you can see from the chart on the right, this course is not just for people who work in technology. These are issues that affect all industries. And so as you can see, we have a great diversity of industries represented in this course, not just IT services or IT products, but also healthcare, telecommunications, energy, education. And if you look at that large wedge, 27% is from others. That covers advertising, agriculture, real estate, retail, tourism, media. So as you can see, this course is not just going to be attended by people geographically diverse. This is also going to be people participating in this course are going to be coming from all years of experience and all different industries. We have some testimonials about people's experience with this, but I want to kind of burn through this quickly and get to our Q&A. So now we're going to be popping up in the chat box right now. If you've heard everything you need to hear and you are ready to sign up for this course, this link will be popping up in your chat box right now, professionalonline1.mit.edu/digital transformation/apply.php. So click on that link and sign up for this course. But right now, we want to get as quickly as possible to our Q&A. So let us throw up, we're going to go in order, and we're going to get through as many of these as possible, and any that aren't answered, we'll try to answer on the back end. So the first question we have to our faculty is, could you please throw some light on the use cases in the field of agriculture? Could you, so for Dr. Sanchez and Professor Williams, could we briefly touch on how agriculture comes up?
Yeah, so for example, if you look at a modern tractor today, it has lots of screens in it, and those screens are telling the farmer basically what seeds to plant in various parts of the field. They're using scripts that have been developed by Monsanto, for example. Another area, they're using blockchain, for example, in Indonesia, so that small farmers can actually get loans more efficiently from banks. So the blockchain allows somebody to put in data, say, about their farm. There's a mini industry of third parties that will walk the land and map it. And that allows that farmer then to go to the bank and get a loan, which they have never been able to do before at the rates, so they get better rates on their loan. So agriculture is one of those areas that has probably, you could argue, it's got the largest data of any industry. That it's being revolutionized. The machines, AI machines, machine learning is being used for devices to control drones, to spray crops, for example, where they're spraying weed killer on individual weeds that are being recognized by cameras on the drone. So it's an area where all of these technologies that we're talking about are being applied. So it's got some great use cases. We won't go into great detail on those, but we will go into how data can be moved around, for example, from a tractor back to a central database to be used perhaps by other farmers. So I think that agriculture certainly is one area where all these technologies are being applied. Maybe we can move on to the...
I'm looking at this, and we have several questions about asking about which cloud environment is used, whether it's AWS or Google or Rackstack, but also someone asking if they're already AWS certified. Is this course going to be repetitive to what they've already learned, or do they have more that they can learn from this course even if they're already AWS certified?
I mean, my sense is that they'll have an advantage in one of the problem sets. but we're also using Google. We don't have an example of Azure, I don't think, Abel.
We do not.
But yeah, DigitalOcean is another one I think that we have an example of. So it may give you some advantage in one area. We use the AWS CDK, which is a fairly new product out of AWS. My sense is you'll still learn something. AWS is a massive organization, so I'd be surprised if you won't learn something.
Yeah, we're also focusing more on the patterns as opposed to the specific tools. And so, you know, if you think about DigitalOcean, about AWS, about Azure, about GCP, you know, the Google Cloud Compute Platform, they're all pretty much doing the same. You might want to go to, for example, to Google because they have better AI. You might want to go to Azure because they have better enterprise integration. You might want to go to AWS because they have better storage. But in the end, it's the patterns that are taking place in each of the clouds. And in fact, there are some tools now that are starting to go above the clouds and allow you to bring all of that in. So just simply to emphasize that we're not specifically you know, making you a master in any one of these technologies. No one has that, not even Amazon itself. They always, when we talk to them, they say they find out about new products from customers because there are so many, and something like 8 a day, I think you were saying, John. And so
it's crazy how many per day they deploy. Yeah.
So we're not focusing any one, and our hope is to get you you know, comfortable with the patterns.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. We have a question here about Silicon Valley versus China's approach to digital transformation, that they have different approaches to digital transformation. And will this be covered in the program?
So I looked this up because I wasn't sure what they meant. And I'm thinking that means the government investing in digital transformation as opposed to industry itself. I think most of our focus is organizational, meaning if you were going to transform your organization, and as John mentioned earlier in this webcast, that only about 25% of organizations are successful. In transformation in general, by the way, and this data goes all the way till the 1990s, is only 30% successful. So it's a challenge within itself to try to change an organization. Now to change a country, that's a much bigger, broader conversation, I think, where government needs to come in. But most of our focus is on the organizations. John?
Yeah, no, I wasn't quite sure what the question meant. Yeah, my sense is that you have to have government approval for most things in China. I think I wouldn't just say Silicon Valley because a lot of things are happening outside Silicon Valley these days. Certainly, Amazon and other places, you know, are operating globally. So Silicon Valley certainly did spawn a lot of things, but it's not the leader in everything. Certainly, biotech, Boston likes to think it's up there. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, interesting question. We're not quite sure what it means, but I think it is true. I see the next comment. If you try the Chinese approach, you might land in jail. Yeah, you might.
Thank you, gentlemen. We also have a couple of questions about our participants' specific industries. We have one question about connected car space and connected vehicle ecosystems. We have another question about this is a useful program for a lawyer. Would there be any way to quickly touch on maybe those specific industries like the automotive industry or even the legal industry, what people from those industries might benefit from this course?
I was going to say, we have some lawyers that come to that lecture in our course on cybersecurity. That space is a great space for lawyers. So
yeah,
go ahead, Abel.
No, all I was going to say is that I think our point in this course is that the topics we're touching are relevant to all. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. You know, we're looking here at a transformative way in which to deliver education. We're certainly rethinking our 4 college-year degree. We're thinking about how we get people trained in certain technologies. So education is being disrupted when it comes to law. You know, I've had conversations with lawyers that sound more like computer scientists than they do lawyers, just because anything that's information heavy, just like finance, accounting, law, is envisioned to be the next transformation that's going to take place. And so I certainly think that's a potential, but in reality, it's all. I talked about sport earlier. We talked about a number of fields. And so my thinking is that these concepts that we're introducing here apply equally across all industries. Some might be more poignant than some than others, but I think regardless of where you are, cloud is an issue. Regardless of where you are, cybersecurity is an issue. Regardless of where you are, blockchain will certainly impact you, and on and on.
Let me just address, Carmen has got a question here about what kind of code. You don't really need to know a language. We'll give you snippets. I mean, the most code will be a few, it's kind of 5 lines of code. Most of this is about taking something that we will show you and applying it so that you might make a change to something in that line that, does SSHs into a machine, say. But we'll pretty much give you examples that you just change slightly. So it's not like you need to learn a language. We're not asking you to learn JavaScript or Python. However, we would say that those languages, knowing one of them, opens doors for you, that you will be able to understand what other people have done much more easily to put together, examples. I think that answers that one.
Yeah, Professor Williams, thank you so much. Actually, I wanted to ask one last question about coding, and you did it for me, coding and programming. Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Williams. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this informational webinar. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. So in our chat box, I want you to quickly look again. In the chat box, there is a link to signing up for this course, and we encourage you to click on that link and join us for this course at MIT Professional Education. There's also going to be another link in the chat box as well for a survey, a post-webinar survey. So please click on that link and let us know how it was. I want to thank Professor Williams and Dr. Sanchez so much for their time. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for teaching us about this course. It was a pleasure spending an hour with you. And everyone, we hope to see you in the classroom. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you all.
Yep, we hope to see you online.
Yeah.